My fellow Amazonians, in the past few weeks, there has been a lot of activities within our country and outside of our country. And so I thought it was important for me to speak to you people so that we are all on the same page. In the 21st century, in the era of social media, information is critical in determining how you conduct yourselves in a liberation struggle like ours. And sometimes getting the right information is probably going to put you in the right frame of mind in order for you to function properly with respect to whatever you are doing in advancing our collective effort to be free from Cameroon. The past 60 years has been bedeviled by misinformation and manipulation and sometimes exaggeration of information. And so we have also experienced in the past 4 years a litany of manipulative ideas that have been sold to Amazonians, which have turned out not to be true. It's also critical that all of us understand, the posture of the international system and how that posture affects different actors and states within the framework of this conflict. I'm going to talk about a couple of international endeavors and how those endeavors directly impact our struggle, either in a positive or in a negative fashion. I will also be talking about, our defense approach and what we think will be the impact of our current defense posture on the ability of Cameroon not only to prosecute its genocidal war, but to continuously attempt to misinform the world that the situation in Amazonia is coming under its control. In the past few weeks, we observed that the Vatican had sent in a representative into Cameroon, who also made a visit into Amazonia. We are not quite sure what the purpose of the visit was. I know a couple of theories have been thrown out there. One is he came to install, a couple of senior Catholic individuals in Bamenda, and he just simply used that occasion to talk about our struggle. Another theory has been the interest of the Vatican to mediate in the struggle between Amazonia and Cameroon. We have not received any official communication from the Vatican, declaring its intention either way. And so everything we postulate or talk about is based on information that we have gathered from the social media. But from a leadership perspective, this is what I would like you to know. As I said in one of my audios, we know the Vatican had shown interest, I think, close to 2 years ago. There had been some initial contacts. We had also, through some third parties, been able to understand the position of the Vatican. There are ongoing efforts in that direction, which I will not get into. But if it is true that the purpose of the visit was also informed by the interest of the Vatican to mediate, we will wait until we receive an official position or communication from the Vatican. Now, in terms of mediation or facilitation, we must know that the Swiss effort to mediate or facilitate has been extremely weakened by a couple of reasons. One, Cameroon's denial to initially commit to any meaningful negotiations. Two, the lack of clarity from the Swiss Foreign Ministry on its role and its inability to articulate in terms of clear identification of the parties to the conflict. Lastly, we have always argued that the position of Switzerland with respect to Cameroon does not give it full impartiality to engage in this process alone. And so there can be virtually no way we will accept any Swiss mediation or facilitation that is not multilateral in nature. And so the weakened nature of the Swiss posture might open the door for other actors to attempt to come in. There is no time that you can have two parallel facilitation in terms of how you resolve a conflict. So if the Vatican has to come in, the Swiss will have to openly declare their withdrawal or their intention to facilitate. As long as the Swiss have declared that intention, the international community will still foolishly rely on that intention, even if the actual process is flawed. And so if the Vatican will have to come in, there are two possibilities. One, come in and work to balance the Swiss, or declare its intention to single-handedly facilitate. And that would mean the Swiss will have to overtly declare their withdrawal from the process. Either way, that is not really our concern. Any international party that intends to facilitate any negotiation between Amazonia and Cameroon must meet the minimum threshold which we have communicated to various international actors, including the United Nations, on the fairness and multilateral nature of such a process. So while we await, what the intentions of the Vatican are, let me say this. I said in my audio, the attitude of the international system has been extremely abysmal and shameful. This is the 21st century. We are not dealing with England. This is not a conflict like between Scotland and England. It's not also a conflict that is mitigated by international institutions like democratic institutions, respect for the rule of law, respect for human rights and due process. This is a conflict that is occurring in the full glare of systematic violation of international humanitarian and human rights law, and a carefully planned genocide to partially or wholly wipe out the Amazonian people, so the enemy can claim our land without any opposition and use it for both economic reasons and geopolitical and strategic reasons. And so we are not dealing with a kind of a normal situation. And so when we find international organizations or state actors and states making repeated visits to speak to the King of Vomeka of the Bulu Republic, we find it interesting that the massacres that are going on in our land, the systematic killing of our civilian population, the genocide, does not preoccupy them. If it did, they would have changed their posture in terms of how they deal with the Yaoundé regime. And this is quite important. We've observed genocide before and the way the international system has behaved. It is not different from the way they are behaving in Amazonia. In 1994, when a million moderate Hutus and principally Tutsis were murdered in 100 days, the United Nations was there. We also know from the evidence that major international players, played an enabling role in the genocide, or at least in protecting the genocidaires and giving them a safe corridor to escape accountability. And so we observe Srebrenica. Now, I mean, hundreds of thousands of people were murdered. There are a lot of crimes against humanity and possibly genocide going on across the globe. And so it's their attitude with respect to the conflict in Amazonia is not unique. It's not unique. It's what we have observed because of the gridlock of the international system, the way it's designed to prioritize states as the principal system to deal with issues. And so their posture has made it impossible for this process to move forward. And that's why I have argued repeatedly that the posture of the international system has to change. It has to be consequential. The actions of Yaoundé has to be seen from through a consequential lens, because we cannot accept that more than 25 years after Rwanda and the different international doctrines and principles put in place to make sure that they can monitor the trend of genocidal crimes and earlier warning systems to stop genocide, that virtually nothing is done with respect to changing the attitude of Cameroon. Now, this is the point. It would also be naive for us to believe that the same system that sold us into servitude and have provided economic support, political cover, and are still currently doing business with Cameroon, including the United States and the United Kingdom, will simply turn their back from Cameroon and embrace what most think is a creation of a new state with different levels of unpredictability. It would be naive from our part to draw that conclusion. Nonetheless, it is our duty to continuously make it clear to the international system that their hypocrisy, their attitude is totally unacceptable. And when we talk about accountability, as it was in the case of Rwanda, we are not only looking at the perpetrators of the crime of genocide. We are also looking at the enablers, not only domestic enablers. Those at the level of the international system who have continuously provided support, financially, economically, political cover to the Yaoundé regime. And what we must know as Amazonians is this, and I have said this repeatedly. We aren't here because anybody cares. If 100 Amazonians will be slaughtered in a day, you would hear the same rhetoric. You will hear the same where the United Nations expresses concern, and you will hear the United States talking about both parties. I mean, as though there is some moral equivalence. Both parties should, prioritize non-violent means. They should engage in discussions. You will still observe these trends even if 1,000 Amazonians are murdered in a day. And that explains why we have continuously argued that we aren't here because of the international system. We've been stuck for 60 years because of them, thanks to their silence, complicity, and overt disregard for international rules and norms that governs the international system. But we are on our way out because of our effort, our strength as Amazonians. The education, it's not only the guns. You may have 10,000 guns on the ground. It wouldn't still free an ill-informed population where there is lack of clarity on the process and the destination. You wouldn't free anybody with 1 million guns if they are not part of the process. And we have taken time in the past 4 years to be able to educate Amazonians on where we are today, where we want to live, and where we are headed to. And we have been able to expose, the complicity of the international system with Cameroon in enslaving Amazonians, and the faulty approaches that have been adopted in the past by our forebears in addressing, the problem. Now, as I said, we are here because we have made the conscious decision to be free. The only reason why we are engaging the international system is because we are part of the global system. It's the nature of the system that even if we liberate our territory and eliminate the last vestiges of Cameroon's presence, we will need to be recognized as an independent state. And there are basic conditions that you must meet to gain, the respect of other nations and international institutions. And that's why we continuously communicate with them and conduct ourselves in a way that shows us as a system in preparation to enter an international system that is governed by certain rules and laws and norms. But for us to be free, it will require Amazonians to continuously, fight hard at every level: self-defense, targeted diplomacy, internationalization, to make sure that all of these strategies are locked in together to have a maximum impact on both the occupier and the international system. So, with respect to whether there is mediation or facilitation, it is not really in the hands of Amazonians. And I have argued repeatedly, and this is proven by facts of history, it is not us, to continuously beg to talk. Because after all, this is what we've done for 60 years. This is what the Funchas did, the Endelis did, and the others. Cameroon has never really been willing to talk. Whenever the international system or there has been domestic pressure to force it into some form of discussion, it has preferred three strategies: time, the use of bribery and corruption, and the use of force. And if these three strategies have worked for 60 years, why should Cameroon, undermine its own sovereignty or claim of sovereignty over Amazonia and ship it over to the Vatican or to Geneva? There is no reason. The only reason that will happen is when we Amazonians compel them through our actions on the ground to do so. In most conflicts that we have studied, it is when, the grip onto power is weakened that occupiers begin to seek covert means, to negotiate themselves out of Waterloo. It wouldn't be different with Cameroon. It wouldn't be different with Cameroon. Now, but all of these things work in favor of Amazonia. Don't get us wrong. All of these things, the flurry of international diplomacy, the activities, the talks, the resolutions, the studies, you know, work in favor of Amazonia. Don't forget, one of our strategies is internationalization. And the reason we developed that strategy was because one, all occupiers want to assume responsibility in solving, the question of international occupation. They don't want the international system to be involved because it would basically be out of their hands and out of their control. And that was one reason. The second reason was because for 60 years, basically, all domestic approaches, whether democratization, whether at least even having some constitutional review of how the structure of the state has basically been rebuffed by Cameroon, rejected with utmost arrogance. And so every domestic approach has failed. And so we opted to internationalize our struggle to make sure that, we change the battlefield. And we've basically changed the battlefield. And so the international flurry of diplomatic activities, whether it's a visit from the Vatican, the declaration by the Swiss to become involved, Canada putting in money, the involvement of the US, statements from the US Senate Foreign Affairs Committee, the the UK House of Lords, the German Parliament, EU. It should make us proud, because look at us, from nowhere, from nobody to somebody, from 2 cubes of sugar, les Biafran, les Anglophones, to somebody. And so sometimes that's why I always encourage you to look at the bright side of things. We've done well. We've done well. For us, without a powerful lobby, without a megaphone at the level of the international community, without the skillful, trained diplomats to navigate the bureaucracy of the international system. Our actions on the ground and leadership has been able to market our plight, our vision, in a way that is now being embraced by the international system. But that's just the first step. That's just the first step. The international system is dynamic, it's fluid. For them, stability, certainty is more critical than the respect for human rights. The stability of the international order, predictability, is very important for the billions of dollars that people have invested in businesses than some few black men somewhere in West Africa crying about their right to to be free. That's irrelevant. The international system is built in a way that they can wipe 8 million Amazonians to keep it survive. So we must be clear about this, and that's why we must never relent our effort in all of the strategies that has brought us here. And we must continuously fight as if the issue of the whole struggle depended on us alone. So we are quite in a good place. Now, how all of these flurry of activities gonna take us somewhere? And this is where I wanna bring some clarity. It's very difficult for the international system to depart from standard international practice. The standard international practice is states recognized under international law should have the primary responsibility and obligation to deal with issues that the international system sees falling within their territorial space and jurisdiction. That's standard international practice. The second standard international practice is that the creation of new states is not in the interest of international stability. The third standard practice is dealing with those who aspire for a new state is going to open a can of worms, because in the world there are so many peoples that are subjugated and suppressed. And if you begin to recognize one and begin to deal with it, talk about it, you give the next one in the next country, the hope that this is possible. And so these standard practices, are there. They inform the way that the international system conducts itself, the way that states conduct themselves on issues of self-determination. And so we are well informed about this. But this is where it becomes interesting. And I would like you to listen to this carefully. Now, though you have the existence of these standard practices, the international system has factored out a way on how to make exceptions. And that's why that has informed the way that I have asked us to conduct ourselves. The one way is using human rights. When the occupying power continue on a path of systematic violation of human rights, gross impunity, and causing situations of massive displacement of persons, whether internally or externally, it opens a window through which the international system can come in on humanitarian grounds. They begin to talk about the humanitarian situation. They come from the perspective of trying to help alleviate the pain and suffering. That's how they find their way in. And that's how the international system has found its way in from the UNDP and different United Nations agencies and regional agencies. So they use these exceptions of massive violation of human rights to introduce themselves into what they think should be the responsibility of the state of Cameroon. The other way is using renowned institutions, like the Norwegian Refugee Council, classifying this conflict as, the most neglected conflict in the world. Although it fits within the humanitarian prism, they use these international non-governmental institutions as a megaphone, to get the attention of politicians, policymakers, and international practitioners. The third way, and it's seen in scholarly work, in reviews, in institutions like foreign institutions, universities, like what we saw in Oxford. If the British Parliament makes a position, Cameroon can claim that's interference that is based on simply political opinion. When Oxford does a research, it's no longer subjective, it's objective. It can still be attacked, but policymakers usually like to use objective reports and recommendations to justify policies. So if I would ask the British government to intervene, it might be unlikely that they intervene. But if a research institute, after conducting a research, comes out with recommendation, it's easy for governments and institutions, governmental institutions, to take those recommendations and act on them. So that's important. And that's why, these activities should give us hope. All of these activities that I've stated, these processes and strategies, should tell us something. One, the center does no longer hold the claim by Cameroon that it can solve this issue or it can defeat us, or its claim of we are part of its geographic space is now questionable. This is a huge victory for the Amazonian people. That the UK House of Lords, prominent members of the House of Commons, are able to publicly speak about this and cite Senate Foreign Affairs Committee resolution. The fact that the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee got a resolution sponsored by prominent US senators, it's a positive sign. It's more than I can say. I'm not saying you should rely on it, but this says a lot. These activities, these activities are sending signals to Cameroon. What then happens with Cameroon is that, and this is a pattern across time and space. Each time the international system becomes involved through these processes and activities, it makes the occupying regimes jittery and they react with more impunity. They want to demonstrate their ability to end the conflict. They cause what they call unforced errors. And that's what we are observing. The attitude, the change in attitude of the international system has made Cameroon to become more brutal. And this is the vicious cycle. As they become more brutal, it increases the pressure on them. Does that mean we will automatically become free? No. This is where self-defense comes in also. The moment the international system becomes interested, policy groups, universities, non-governmental, governmental institutions, a flurry of activities, the Vatican, Senate, if once all of these things, institutions become involved, there will be a tick up in violence. There is a likelihood you are defeated at that moment because those regimes will invest whatever they have to undermine the posture of the international system. Because once there is a reversal in fortunes, the international system says, all right, Cameroon has the upper hand, so let's walk away. That is what Cameroon is thinking. That is why we must be very careful. That is why this is not the time to be jumpy. This is not the time, to be celebrating. This is the time for hard work. Hard work. I will come into that. Let me just conclude on the issue of diplomacy. Now, 10,000 heads of states can go visit Mr. Biya. They can go talk to civil society, go talk to churches. It wouldn't end the war. The churches wouldn't speak for us. Civil society will not. The nationalist movement overseeing this liberation effort will speak alongside with every other group of Amazonians, will speak for us. This is the way it works. What do you see happening going around churches and going around meeting enablers, traitors like the Balas and murderers like the others? I sometimes really hate to think about them. I get a bit worked up because you cannot understand in the face of the killings. Find some of them still wearing the outfit, the bloody outfit of the occupier. You find some of them talking shit in newspapers. You even find newspapers that should be nationalist, that should speak for us, that should be our own voice when we are denied the right to speak, trying to play moral equivalence between us and the murderers who've killed us for 60 years. So sometimes I don't really want to talk about it. I just want to keep it aside. There will be a time for us to deal with them. But what we must know is this. They can go down to Yaoundé 100 times. The only way this thing will end is when they begin to let Yaoundé understand that there are actors on the other side who are visible and that we will engage with them in a visible manner. It will lower the arrogance of Yaoundé. But playing this public diplomacy with Yaoundé and private diplomacy with Ambazonia is not going to change the attitude of Cameroon. This is the time for the international system to meet with us publicly, have meaningful discussions, and let us give them our own way of seeing this thing coming to an end. We are a state. We are not conjuring it. We are not creating a new one. We have been, we are, and we will be. So the way this thing is going is working extremely well for us. And be rest assured, our posture has not changed. After 60 years of manipulation, deception by the United Nations, manipulation and abandonment by the United Kingdom and the international system, nobody will drag us into a negotiation that does not meet the minimum conditions of fairness, transparency. Nobody will do that. It is not because we hate negotiations. 90% of conflicts end through negotiated settlements. And so we may be the exception, but we are ready when Cameroon commits and the international system shows its preparedness through the kinds of institutions it creates to facilitate and oversee implementation of any agreed upon terms. So, Ambazonians, you must know that we are not bystanders. We aren't bystanders. So when you see the Vatican going into Bamenda holding church services, going and talking to Mr. Bia, don't bother. They will come to us. We are an international contender. We are a party to the conflict. And they will treat us with respect and with a level of equality with Cameroon. But it's also important that this struggle is not left simply in the hands of leaders and our Ambazonian Defense Forces fighters and its sister forces. This is a collective endeavor as it manifests itself every Monday. When you find almost 25 years or more ago when we were in this, when the Commonwealth Secretary General Emeka Anyako was coming down to the University of Boya, we didn't lock ourselves in our homes. We carried placards and expressed our desire to be free. And so when these international persons are coming, except we have called for a lockdown, which I don't think is necessary when you have these international persons visiting, we should mobilize ourselves with our flags, our signs, carrying the coffin of all the thousands of people that they've murdered to show them what we are going through and where we want to go to. So it's important that we remain active, in this movie of our own liberation. We are the principal protagonists. We are the principal actors. Leaders are servants, are guides who take their knowledge of international system, international strategies, to guide the population to where the population really wants to go. Leaders aren't taking you to that destination. They're guiding you because that's where you want to go. And so we must continuously be engaged. And that's what we have been doing. And I can assure you that though there have been some mistakes in terms of diplomacy, in terms of the way we've conducted, some persons have conducted themselves, we as Ambazonians have conducted ourselves well at the level of the international system. We are seen with respect, treated with admiration for our knowledge and for our ability to communicate our intentions clearly and precisely. And we should remain focused on that path. So each time you see a flurry of international activities, know that it's working in your favor. And we are doing a lot of work in the background to engage. I also learned a couple of days ago, another Ambazonian group is invited to speak within the context of a Canadian institution. We know of an upcoming panel discussion in the UK that would involve prominent persons who have spoken for Ambazonia. Ambazonians should participate and to make their voices heard. That is positive news also, and we should embrace it and use that positive spirit to be able to dig our heels in with respect to defending our land, to defend our people. So, with respect to self-defense, I'll say this. We've lost a lot of people. We lost Nelly and three other teenagers in Meta quarters, butchered by the regime. We lost 10 of our compatriots in Mautu, a couple of others killed everywhere systematically. And if you the body counts for Amazonians in the past 4 weeks alone is more than 50 Amazonians murdered. And that's why we must continuously equip our men, to be decisive in the battlefield, to at least protect our civilian population and to defend the gains that we have made in the past 4 years. But I think there's been a change in attitude on ground zero. On the 1st of January, Amazonian Defense Forces fighters who had passed through Bali, came through the same place, and they met their brothers and sisters there. And I received a call early morning from all of them. And first I was worried what was going on, but they were brothers together, celebrating the new year together. And the call from Grandpa of Bali set the tone for the new year. Our forces are coming together. The 1st of January, Grandpa of Bali set the tone on how we must conduct ourselves and his readiness to use his own base as a medium of facilitation with honesty, strength, and boldness. That reverberated across different barracks within the territory. It started happening in different places. All those who see collaboration as a means of undermining their power are seeing the danger of, posturing yourself as a supreme organ under which others must line up. It has been a wonderful year despite the killings of our civilian population. But that's not all. In the past few weeks alone, more than 50 La République soldiers have been killed in our land. As that was not enough, early February, a contingent of forces still led by Grandpa, including our forces within the Bamenda Brigade, took out the armor car worth $500,000. That's the beginning of February. That's how good it's going. We saw within FACO, combined force from Meme, the Amazonian Defense Forces, the Black Tar, and others, the Mountain Lions, all the commanders, they put Amazonia first, work together, and undermine Cameroon's ability to show some sense of normalcy. He pushed players into armor cars. For the first time, Victoria also took part. Amazonians are coming together. And as I promised, we will win as a people. We are different actors in this theater, doing our own contribution in our own small ways, in our own places. That should culminate ultimately to the defeat of Cameroon and ushering in of our new nation. That's the ultimate objective. And we are winning. Next week will be the 11th of February. On the 11th of February 1961, through coercion, violation of the spirit of Article 76B of the UN Charter on Trust Territory, violation of a self-governing territory, the status of the self-governing territory, our constitution, and the fact that we've been the first pluralism in the continent of Africa, the first democracy, first country that has conducted an election, peaceful transition of power, stable space. They negated all of these things and forced onto us an election to choose to die through plane crash or sink in the high sea. And it's where I blame our own forebears and our leaders in the past. How is it possible that you could walk out of the Eastern House of Nigeria, walk away from mighty Nigeria, establish a system, set up a government, governmental institutions, parliamentary institutions, conduct free and fair elections, establish your own constitution, and simply allow yourself to be taken over through bullying and coercion by a system that you provided them with protection. How is it possible that since 1961 up till now, we Ambazonians allowed ourselves to be manipulated on every 11th February to go out and eat sardine and bread, buy biscuit, get our uniforms ironed, march, sing their anthem, worship their flag? Collective failure. We have all been responsible for the institutionalization of a day of oppression and deceit. But we can't blame ourselves to the end, because in the last 4 years, we have shown through our actions and our articulations that we can undo the harm that our ignorance, naivety cause millions of our people, and that we will not celebrate the days of shame, days that we should be mourning lost democracy, lost institutions, lost economy, that we will not celebrate heroes and villains of others, and that we will celebrate our own heroes, those men and women who've risen and defended our right to be free. That we will think of the day Ambazonians massively came out, that we will celebrate, the 30th of December, the day in 1999 that late Justice Alogwede Ebon rose up, took over Radio Boya, and declared independence. And that we will celebrate, the action of Fongoji Dinka, who at a time when very few could speak, was able, after Cameroon on the 4th of February, 1984, reverted to its name, declared the restoration of the statehood of Ambazonia. That we will celebrate the bravery of Chief Ayamba, Hitler Binglo, the kids who were murdered in Bui on the 1st of October 2001. That we will celebrate the bravery of our fighters, the Smolees. That we will celebrate the words of Grandpa of Bali, the bravery of General Ivo, the mastery of the 7 Qatas. We will celebrate the bravery of the ADF, the Mountain Lions, the Black Tars, and that we will reject all manipulations, all days of shame. We've done so in the past 4 years. And that's why on Thursday, we should reject this day, simply ignoring it, staying home. And our forces must be on the plow to make sure all enablers, infiltrators that violate the order of the state are held accountable. My people, I have always said lockdowns impose hardships. They should be short, clear, and its objectives clearly defined. This is one of them. Make sure that we give them a bloody nose on the 11th of February. I want to thank our forces for working together. It doesn't mean you will not have challenges. You will still have challenges. But you must do all in your powers to work together so that you can end your days in the bushes. You can end your days of uncertainty. My fellow people, Ambazonia is independent and free. The role of this generation is to defend that freedom and that independence. That is our principal focus. Great leaders are not known by their ability to lead the people who like them or who agree with them, but to be able to navigate difficult terrains, to lead those who disagree with them and show some level of understanding. That is why we must embrace the new spirit on ground zero, bringing us together, There is nothing new we can invent. There is nothing new. The strategies we put in place in the past 4 years have worked. We must stabilize our forces, equip them more, provide enough bullets for them to defend themselves, stabilize the ground. We have put in place a stabilization force that will help peripheral, little weak forces to defend their outpost, ensure that kidnapping for ransom and extortion is reduced or eliminated. We're working together with our communities to establish transitional authorities that will deal with issues of community justice, community education, health, and community policing. This collaboration between our forces and civilian population will mitigate, the effect of bad actors and elements within our struggle. Do not listen to the manipulators on the other side, the enablers, the Atangangis and others who've sold their consciences to an outgoing regime. Their days are numbered. They are shaken, weakened. The days of Mr. Beer are numbered. It's numbered. And we have sped up that day. This generation, through its triumphs, through its tribulations, its endeavors, its bravery and tenacity, have rewritten the history of the Gulf of Guinea. That a people oppressed for 60 years could rise up on the same spot on which their forebears fell, with their bare hands, and dismantle a system of tyranny and curtailment backed by international conspiracy. If that's the only achievement that we must have, so let it be. My fellow countrymen and women, we are on the right side of history. We've conducted ourselves with dignity, respect for the sanctity of human life, and we should continue on that path. We should be tolerant, but we should take no prisoners as far as those who enable colonialism, genocide in our homeland. The chiefs and the fawn who attempt to legitimize occupation and brutality. Those who seek to use the freedom of expression denied us to articulate the agenda of the occupier. And those who, through their actions, their commissions and omissions, perpetuate the system that has dealt us a big blow in the past 60 years. There will be accountability. We will not go down the South African path. We will leave that to God. But there will be accountability. I ask our forces to continuously be offensive as far as dealing with the remnants of Cameroon's presence. I also ask Amazonian forces still fighting within the colonial regime to take a step back and re-examine the role they are playing in spilling the blood of our people. Isn't it a shame that after 4 years, you pride money over freedom? You pride money over the lives of your own people. You work for those who murder your own people. You serve those who kill your own children. You serve those who burn your villages. You serve those who kill Mamiapi. Isn't it shameful that when you watch what happened in Gabon almost a year ago, you're unable to take a stand for Amazonia? I ask all of you to take a stand. All Amazonian forces fighting within Cameroon must, as a matter of urgency, take a stand for Amazonia. This is what brave men and women do. Lackeys and weaklings work for the oppressor for little money. Money you will never enjoy. Conscience that you will never rebuild. Failures that you will never rewrite. This is the time for you to walk away. Join your brothers and sisters who've been battling for 4 years without pay, but with the ultimate hope that their greatest pay will be freedom. To those in the diaspora, you are in exile, pushed out by the occupier. So far, you've done well, but it's not enough. As I said the last time, there is no dawn of fatigue. We must recommit, rededicate, and re-energize our base to make sure that we continuously use our megaphones out here to inform the world, share our meager resources with our people, support our IDPs and our refugees. I know some of you think because they are refugees and so they have ultimate support. No. We want to thank those who have been relentless in providing support to our refugees in Nigeria. And I ask Amazonians to make generous contribution to those within the IGK, as I said the other day, who are doing a marvelous job contributing and supporting the refugees. And I ask all of us to be tolerant with each other. Let our ideas reign supreme. Let our strategies speak for us. Let our victories speak for us. Amazonia is big enough for others to exist, and we must be tolerant. We have come thus far not because we are perfect. We have come thus far because we are human, with our fallibilities, with our frailties. But we've also come thus far because we've identified our weaknesses, work on them to make ourselves better for ourselves, our people, and for the generation yet unborn. That is exactly how we must continuously conduct ourselves until Cameroon is out of our country. The sun has risen over our homeland. God bless you all. God bless our homeland.